So now we're going to go through the backend in Xano setup for this rental marketplace application. So remember, Xano handles the backend of your application. So not only does that include your database, your API, your business logic, but also takes care of your DevOps, your server, your hosting, all your CPU resources, and much more. So to get started, we're going to go through the Jumpstart wizard. And it's just a few pages to get our workspace for this application in Xano set up. So first step is I'll just name this rental marketplace with Bravo Studio. And I'll go ahead and hit continue. And then today I'm going to start from scratch. And right away we can articulate those higher entities or those database tables for our database. Remember, the database is what we like to call the heart of your application. It's where all your data and all your content sits. So first we're just going to name those higher entities, and then later on we'll go through and actually set up the fields or schema for that and the relationships. So I'm going to have a user table that's going to hold the information of all the guests in this rental marketplace application. Later on we'll go in and we'll also add hosts to that user table. But for now, we're just doing the guest side of things. Additionally, we're going to have a table called listings, and this will just hold all the information of all those properties or different listings that a user can go search through and actually reserve. And now that I've mentioned reserve, we're going to have a table called reservations. And this is going to hold all the information of when a user actually books or reserves a listing and everything you need to know about their stay. Okay. Additionally, down here, Xano will auto-generate all your basic CRUD API operations for you. We're going to uncheck this because we only need a handful of API endpoints for this application, and I'll just build them all from scratch. So I'll hit continue. We won't add any custom CRUD right now. I'm going to skip these features. Lastly, just how our users will log in. So Xano handles authentication, which just means sign up and log into your application using something called JWE tokens, which is just a industry standard for encryption tokens or authentication tokens. And we do that by taking in the user's email address as the input value. So I'm going to go ahead and hit finish, and that'll load my workspace. So now that we have set up just those database table names, let's jump to the database and let's actually go through and set up the different fields or schema and relationships of these higher entities, right? So first in the user, email, password, that all looks good. I'm also going to add a image here, and I'll do image metadata under storage, and I'll call this something like profile pic. So our guests have a profile image. And to add a record, pretty straightforward. So I'll add Christina in here as our first user. But as you can see, you just type in here. I'll give her something like password 123. Uploading an image, this will just open up your file on your computer. But this is the only data I'm going to add for now. I'll pause the video and add dummy data later, so this video doesn't get crazy long. Let's actually go next into this listings here, and here you can see we just have this ID number and created at. So we need to actually add some different things. So if we're thinking about a rental marketplace, something similar to say like an Airbnb, they usually have some information on there like a place type or property type, name, description, etc., price. So let's go ahead and start adding fields like that. So first, let's go ahead. Let's do an enum here, and let's go ahead and call this something like place type. And then an enum allows us to name certain values that can be chosen from. So I can say something like entire place. I can say something like hotel room, maybe private room, and then maybe there's something like a shared room, and we'll just leave that there for now. So I'll go ahead and hit save. So those will be our potential values for each listing. And then let's do another enum value here. I'm going to go ahead and call this property type, and that should give me an automatic space. Perfect. So the values in here, and you can even set a default value, but we're not going to do that today. I'll say something like entire house. We'll do an apartment. hotel room, and then maybe we'll also do something like a loft, and that'll just be good to start for now. And then let's go ahead, let's add a text field here. We'll do a name of the place. In addition to that, we'll say something like description. Let's go ahead and do a text field for city, and we'll pull that city when we look up the weather, real-time weather for an actual location. We'll also do something called country, and we'll be able to also search these properties, or listings I should say, on all these values. Additionally, we're going to need a price. So for this, I might just do an integer. We'll just do clean whole numbers, and we'll call this price, not 300, not the actual price there. I'll hit save. And then lastly, let's have some actual images for each listing, right? You want to see what it looks like before you actually go ahead and book it. So I'm going to go down to storage, and I'll go to image metadata, and I'm going to make this, first I'll just call this images, and then the structure here, I'll actually make this a list. So it'll be an array of different images, so we can have multiple images per property. So I'll save that, and once again, I won't go through and add this data with you. I'll do that later just for the sake of how long this video would be. So lastly, this reservations table, and this is where our first relationships are going to come in as well. So reservations are going to need to keep track of what user has booked which listing. So when we go into here, the first thing I'm going to do is do a couple table references. First to the user table to keep track of what user has booked a listing, and then a table reference to the listing to know what listing they've actually booked. Okay, so that'll make a relationship between those two tables. Additionally, we'll need a couple timestamps here, say a start date, so we know when the user checks in, and then we'll do another timestamp and we'll do an end date, so we know when they check out. Additionally, let's add in here an integer for the number of nights of their stay. We'll go ahead and do another one for the price per night. And then lastly, let's go ahead and add one final one for the total price there. Okay, and that'll be our reservations table right there. So if I go back and I wanted to show the table relationships, you can see here that reservations maps to the user and also to the listings table. But great, now we've set up all those different fields and relationships that are going to be in these higher entities. So now we're ready to jump into the API and start building those API endpoints for all the logic in this rental marketplace application. So if I jump to the API on the left side, you'll see this default API group. And since I didn't auto-generate all those basic CRUD endpoints, when I click in here, all we see are the authentication endpoints. So because we need the user to actually sign up or log into our application to use the endpoints and to use our application, we already have these set up because I selected that email login method during the Jumpstart wizard. So you can see the endpoints like sign up, they take in a name, email, password. They check that the user doesn't already exist. They add the user, create the authentication token. The authentication token is passed from endpoint to endpoint, so we know who the user is that they say they are, and they are actually the authenticated user of our application. Login is very similar, just takes in the email and password. It makes sure the user actually exists, it checks the password, and then it generates that authentication token. This auth me one, we'll use this to pull the user's profile, and it's just getting the user's record based on the unique ID that's stored or encrypted in the authentication token. So we're able to know exactly which user is which based on the ID stored in the authentication token. So now let's go about adding those other API endpoints. So imagine when our user logs in to the application, they'll land on some kind of home page that might have a list view of all the different listings they could book, right? So let's go ahead. I'm going to add a new API endpoint here. And I might actually just do a CRUD operation to the listings. And I'll call this a get listings. And I'll go ahead and hit save. And this will essentially give us all the records from the listings table. So we can use this to push all the data from our listings table into our front end, into Bravo to be displayed. This query all records function has a whole lot of functionality. You can do filtering with things like joins or custom query. Output tab where you can add add-ons to extend the data, change how it's returned, add evals, even add external manipulation. So a lot of power there. We're just going to leave this as is for now. And this will suffice to provide us our list view of all those properties or listings. And then next what I want to do is I want to add an API endpoint we're going to have also a search page for our listings. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a CRUD operations here, and I'll do listings again, and I'll do a get, and this one I might name something like listings search. And I'll create this endpoint. So in order to search, we need to be able to take in some kind of input that we want to search on. So something that we like to do that makes it super flexible is we can do this JSON input here, and we can call this search. And now we can go into this query all records from the listings and add some by custom query here. So we can do these different conditional statements based on every single field that we want to be able to search on. So let's go ahead and start adding them. So when I add a conditional, when I open this, we can see we have access to our database fields. So let's first do listings.placeType. Let's say that has to be like our input, search. And then let's add some or statements because we want this to be super flexible. So like just means, similar to, maybe it doesn't have the exact capitalization and everything, or equal would have to be an exact match. So like is more flexible. Search, if that's what you need. Property type, we'll also make sure to do this like operator. And once again, we'll choose this input for search. Let's see what other fields we might want to search on. Let's go ahead and do city will also be another like operator. And we'll go ahead and choose our input search. Once again, another or. Let's also select the country. And once again, this will be like, just to make it more flexible search. And then we have name and description. So name and description are going to be longer strings of text, right, with maybe multiple different words. So when we do name, let's actually go ahead and use this includes operator. So if I might have a property name that says beach getaway, but I just want to search the word beach, then this listing name will still come up. So now I can go ahead and select my input. And then lastly, one more or on description. And same thing, I'm going to use includes because description will be a little bit longer. So maybe there's just a keyword or two in that long description that we put in the search value, so we want it to come up. Okay. One last thing here is we have this toggle button for ignore empty values. So I'm going to select that for everything because if there is, say, something that doesn't relate to one of these search parameters, then it'll just skip over that and ignore empty values. So if we were to search nothing, all our listings would come up. It's a nice little feature to have here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Make sure to save this query. And now let's go back and let's stick around on our listings API endpoints. So when we have that list view and we actually click on a listing, we'll be taken up to a more detailed view of our listing. So we can use a single get API endpoint for that. So I'm going to do a CRUD operation, and I'm going to do listings, and I'm going to do a get single here. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit save. So right now this will just take in the listing ID and find that single listing record and display that. But in addition to that, remember we also want to set up a external API call to a weather API so we can see the real-time weather. So I'm going to take you through that process of how to do that right now and add that to this endpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and use this website called weatherapi.com. It's got a freemium plan that I can use to display real-time weather data or forecast. Pretty nifty. So we're going to go ahead and use this, but let me jump back to Xano real quick. I'm going to build this external API call in a function, and then I'm going to insert it into this API endpoint. So if we go to the library into functions, and maybe I call this something like weather API here, and I hit save. Now what I can do is this allows me to reuse this logic anywhere I want in case I needed to use it in other API endpoints, and also just kind of hides the complexity all in one line when you insert it somewhere, and I'll show you more of what that means. So to use this weather API, let's go ahead and I'm going to jump to their documentation, and they have this nice interactive API Explorer. So I can actually drop in my API key, choose my protocol, HTTPS, format, JSON, XML. We're going to work with JSON. And then the parameter is easy as just a city. And then we'll be able to get our current weather forecast. Looks like we can determine if we want the air quality. There's going to be more information, more detailed information on this in their weather API documentation. So obviously, whenever you're working with external APIs, it's super important to read and understand their API documentation to understand how their parameters are set up, how you need to insert authentication or API secret or key. No one API is really made the same, so very important that you read that and understand that. What this is going to do, this is probably going to give me a nice curl command here, so I'm going to first insert my API key, and then I'll scroll down so you don't actually see this and skip ahead. And then for the city here, as an example, let's put in San Francisco, and this will give us the current weather for this city. So if I go ahead and show response, what we do is we see the URL for the call, and I can actually copy this and come back to Xano. And let's go ahead and add an external API request function here. So I can go ahead and define the URL here, and we open up this nice text editor. So what we can do is we can see that we have different parameters here in the URL, like key, Q, which is going to be the city, and AQI if we want to include the air quality index. So Xano's flexible enough to make this dynamic right here on the URL, but we can also do it on the parameters, so it's a little more visually pleasing, if you will. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this all the way up to the question mark, because this is just my standard API URL here, and I'll hit save. And then in the parameters, I'm going to actually set these different parameters that showed up in the URL. So first was the key path, and I have my weather API key stored in an environment variable. You can set those in the settings page of your Xano workspace. So I'm going to select that there, and the settings page is just right here on the left side. I'm going to do another set filter here, and this time the parameter was Q. And I'll hit update, and I need to do one thing there before I update that. And then lastly was AQI, which was air quality index. And I'm just going to hard code this to no. I'm going to say we never need this, and I'm going to hit save. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an input here, and I'll call this text, and I'll call this city. And when we hook this up to the API endpoint that gets the single listing, we'll use the getRecord function to map to this input. I'll show you all how to do that. So now that I have that input, let's go back into this API call here, and let's go back into this Q parameter, and let's go ahead and map this to the input of city here. This will help us make that just dynamic. So let's go ahead and do a test here. Let's go ahead and look at the current weather for Barcelona. I'm not going to include the debug information. So now you can see we get this full API callback. Here's the request. You can see those parameters got added to the URL. We can see the different parameters here. And now we get our response. So we can see we get a whole lot of stuff. We have the request, the response, we have these headers, and then we have results here. So result looks like the information that I actually want to work with. And actually, I don't even know if I need this location stuff because we already know the location. Maybe I just want information right here in this current. So what I can do here is we have this very nice, easy way to visually parse through our data here so we can work with the exact data that we want. So I might do a copy result as JSON here, and I'll show you more what I'm doing here. And I'll go to data manipulation. I'm going to create a variable, and I'll just call this something like results we want. And on the value here, when I drop down, I'm going to select this API1 call variable, which is coming from this actual API call. And I can hit this subpath button right here. And since I've copied that JSON result, I can paste that in to define the subpath and then hit define. And this allows me to visually traverse through our data so I can get to exactly where I want to be. So I don't need anything in the request. I'm going to open the response and then the results, and then current. If we go ahead and look at current, this is the actual information that I want. This is the object I want. So if I just go ahead and select current, Xano will automatically create the correct dot notation for me, and I can hit save. And now I can change the response here to something like results we want. And now when I go ahead and run this for Barcelona, we can see we get just the data back, which is really awesome. So lastly, we probably won't use all this information, right? There's a whole lot of information. Maybe we're just going to work with something like temperature and probably also the condition. But you see it gives us stuff like wind, pressure, humidity, cloud, etc. So Xano actually makes it super easy to get rid of any unnecessary data that you may want to exclude from your responses, right? So what I can do here is I can actually do data manipulation and update this variable. So I can go ahead and select the results we want and update it by the results we want. And then I can add a filter here. And I can do something like unset, which removes the value of a path within the object and returns the updated object. So now maybe I want to get rid of something like, I know there was cloud. I'll go ahead and update that. Maybe let's add another unset filter. And I won't do these all. I just want to show you this example. I believe humidity was another one. So I'll go ahead and hit update that. And let's hope my spelling is correct there. I can't remember if there were uppercase or lowercase values, but that will matter. So I'll go ahead and hit save. And now when we run this again and we get this new response back, and you can see humidity and cloud I think was right in the middle, and now that's gone. So you can easily get rid of any unnecessary data you want to just focus on what's important. But okay, now we've built this API call in a function. So now we can easily insert this back into our API. So if I go into this get listing here and I add a new function, if I go to custom functions, we'll see our weather API is saved right there. So when I select this, remember how we had the city as an input? So what we can do here to map this input, since we're already getting the record from the listing, I can go ahead and select that variable that's created from that function and use dot notation to find the field that had the city. In this case, it was just called city, so that is easy enough for me. And the output here, I'll just call this weather, and I'll hit save. And then let's also just make sure to add the result from this API call to our response so that we're able to access it on the front end as well. And we'll call that weather there. So now we're returning both all the information on the listing in addition to the weather for that listing. Okay, so now our user would be looking at this detailed listings page. What can they do next? They can actually book or reserve this listing. So let's go ahead and create that endpoint that creates a new reservation. So I'm going to do add new endpoint here. I'll do a CRUD operation and I'll do reservations here. And this is going to be a post. This is going to create a reservation. I'll hit save. So a few things, we're going to go ahead and customize this a bit. First and foremost, and I should have said this on the other endpoints, well, we won't need the user ID because we're actually going to work with authenticated endpoints for everything. Remember, our user is going to actually be logged in. So I'm going to turn on user authentication here. I'll do those on all the other endpoints in a second. We'll need a listing ID, start date. We're actually going to calculate the nights. We're going to grab the price. And I'll show you all this in a second, and then we're going to calculate the total all in this endpoint. So right now we have this add record from reservations. So let's go ahead. The first thing we're going to do actually, because we want to get the price from the existing listing, to calculate the total. Let's go ahead and add a new database request here. We'll do a get record from the listings page. We'll make sure to map this to the input of the listings ID here. And then I'll just call this listing, just to be easier on the nomenclature. And I'm going to drag this above. So when the user comes from that detailed page, they want to go ahead and actually book this listing. We'll have the information of that listing ID and all the information, including stuff like the price, all those details included in here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually calculate the duration of the stay based on the inputted check-in or start date and checkout or end date time, okay? So that'll help us calculate the total price based on the price per night. So let's go ahead and I'm going to do data manipulation. I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to call this something like duration of stay here. And the value is I'm going to take our end date here, and then I'm going to add a filter in here to subtract our input of the start date. I'm going to hit update. And then additionally there, because timestamps in Xano are stored in Unix timestamps in milliseconds, which is the amount of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970 UTC, we're going to actually need to do some division to actually get a real number of nights here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a filter here, and it's going to be divide. And I'm going to divide by this number. And all I did was Google the amount of milliseconds in a day to come to this number. Okay, so it's a large number, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and hit update. So now we have our calculation for the duration of a stay. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Next, what we want to do is calculate the total cost of our stay. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new variable here again. And I'm going to go ahead and call this something like total price. And here what I'm going to do, the value I'm going to start with will be our listings dot price. So this is the price stored on the listing table there of this single listing record. And now all I'm going to do is multiply it by that newly created duration of stay variable, which gives us the amount of nights. And I'll go ahead and hit save. So now that we have these variables, we can actually map it up to this add record function here. So first things first, as you can see, we took out some of these inputs. So you can see there's like text here instead of input. For user ID, we're going to go ahead and use the authenticated user ID. So if I just type in auth there, that'll find the user ID based on the ID in the authentication token. We'll leave the listing ID mapped to that input, the start date mapped to the input, end date. Nights here, nights will be now this duration of stay variable. The price, we can get the price from our listings variable and use dot notation to grab the price. And then the total, we'll grab that from the variable we created to calculate the total price. Okay, and that's how this will be mapped. I'm going to hit save. One other thing here is I'm going to add on some data in the output. So for example, this will give us information on this reservation, but what if we just want to see a few more details, just say on this listing itself? Like maybe after we book the reservation, we just want to see a photo, or maybe even just the city so we know where we're going. Let's go ahead and do an add-on so we can get that information. And add-ons are just a way to extend the data of a single API request from different data sources. There's a really great tutorial we have on it on our YouTube channel. It's very similar to GraphQL and a very powerful feature, and gives you control over how your data is queried. So definitely recommend checking that out. But I'm going to do an add-on here. I'm going to hit create new add-on, and I'm going to choose which database table to add to the response. So I'm going to add the listings table, and then I'm going to do a single item. And this is what I was talking about. We can choose how we want the data returned. We can do single item, list, count, existence, aggregates. So a lot of control and power here, but we're only going to have one listing per reservation. So I'm going to do a single item. And how I'm going to map it is based on that listings .id. So the primary ID in the listing table is going to map to the table reference listing ID in the reservation table. I'm going to hit next. The name will just be listings. I'll hit create add-on. And here we can see we'll get the add-on and all that data back when we make that reservation, so that we can have actually access to that when we see the newly created reservation there. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And that'll be it for this reservations. And while I remember, let's go ahead and make sure that we have authentication toggled on for all these endpoints. So I'm going to go ahead and simply one-click toggle these, which just means the user to actually run these API endpoints. And I'll go ahead and show you when I go to run and debug. We actually need the authentication token of a user. And Xano makes it easy to grab that here in the tool for run and debug purposes. As you can see, there's the auth token. We could one-click copy that, but how your users will actually access that when using the application will be by hitting the either sign up or login endpoints, depending on what stage of user they're at. So next, let's stick here on reservations, and we'll do another API endpoint. And I'll do a CRUD operation, and we'll do reservations, and this will just be a get single reservation. Pretty simple. So we just want to go ahead and look at a single reservation, and let's just add that same add-on there. And because I already created it, it's going to be saved, and we just need to make sure it's mapped up correctly. So here we're seeing the listings ID is mapped to the listings ID there. So I'm going to go ahead and hit done, and we can see that will be mapped together. So I'll hit save, and this will just be so we can pull a single reservation if need be. And once again, let's go ahead and just enable user authentication. So last but not least, there will be a page for users to select their trips, or basically see their own reservations. So let's go ahead and create a list view for that. So I'm going to add new API endpoint, do a CRUD operation from the reservations, and we'll do a get, and this will call my reservations. Once again, we'll turn on user authentication, and we'll hit save. So first things first, let's jump into this query all records from reservations and by custom query, because we only want the user to see their own reservations, right? It'd be really bad if you're able to see reservations of random other users in your application. So one way we can enforce that is here in the custom query. We can go ahead and say reservations.userID is equal to that authenticated user ID. Okay, this will make sure that we're only pulling the reservations that belong to ourselves. So I'll go ahead and hit save there. And then in addition, let's go ahead one more time and add that add-on to listings so we can see that information again of the listing at the same time of our reservation, in case we need to know something like, oh, what city was that in, or what was the actual price I paid, or just an image, right? So let's go ahead and save that. Now, a couple other things. So first is we want to be able to display the dates in a nice way on our front end. Because Xano stores timestamps in a Unix timestamps in milliseconds, that's a very large number that isn't the most human readable friendly. But in Xano, we can format timestamps almost however we want, really. So they're a nice readable fashion. So what I'm going to do is, because we're looking at a list here, we need to iterate through this list in order to manipulate. And we're going to accomplish that with a for each loop. So I'm going to go to data manipulation and go to loops and go to for each loop, which allows us to iterate over a list of items. So here in the for each loop, I'm going to go ahead from the dropdown and select our variable from the query all records. So that's just a list of all of our reservations, right? And I'll simply go ahead and hit save. And now, nested in this loop, I'm going to do a couple of update variables. So the first one is going to be for our variable model dot start date. And I'm just going to update that by itself. And then I'm going to add a filter here. And what I'm going to search for is format timestamp. So it's able to convert a timestamp into a human readable formatted date based on supplied format. So the format here, and I don't expect you to know this, but I'm gonna do a lowercase j space m, and this will just put it in a format that says something like 21 July, but July would be shorthanded to like JUL. And this is just something that makes it easier to read. If you're curious about the different formats, you can go to our documentation. There's links to php.net, which is how Xano uses all these different potential format timestamps. So you can combine all these to get really creative as you want and get your timestamps in pretty much any human readable format. So once again, that's in our documentation. There's links to the page on php.net that shows you how you can format your timestamps. So I'll hit update, I'll hit save, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and duplicate this update variable here because all we're gonna change really is just from start date to end date, and we're gonna use the same exact format. Just a side note, whenever you are manipulating variables like this, always make sure you have the variable selected. Sometimes I've seen users working when it says a text data type here and they're wondering why their data is not getting updated. So just be wary of that. But anyways, this will now update these timestamps into a much more easier to read and digestible way. Last but not least, we want to be able to sort our reservations based on seeing whatever is upcoming next first. So for example, if today is July 21st and I have a reservation on the 30th of July, and I have one in the future, maybe on August 30th, I want to be able to see the reservation on July 30th first because that's the next upcoming one. So how do we do that in Xano? Well, it's a little more of an advanced topic, and there's actually a tutorial exactly on this use case if you're curious in learning more. But what we're going to do is basically create a sort with a dynamic variable. And this variable is going to be dynamic in the sense that we're going to be using this data type of now, so that we're basically separating reservations that happened in the past and reservations that are in the future. And then we're going to apply two sorts in order to accomplish seeing whatever is next upcoming first. So I'm going to jump to the output tab of my query all records function. I'm actually going to add an eval here, and I'm going to just access our reservations.start date, and I'm going to call this in past. Okay, so this is going to create a new field right now called in past into my reservation object, but I'm going to add a filter here so that it's not the exact same data as my start date, and this filter is going to be called between. Okay, and between allows you to determine if a value is between two other values. So we're going to say if our start date is between the timestamp 0, which is once again January 1st, 1970 UTC, and the timestamp now, which obviously now is always a moving variable because now is always changing, and I'm going to hit update, then that'll create basically a true or false Boolean. So if the start date is between 0 and now, we know the start date is in the past. If it's not, we know it's in the future. So I'll go ahead and hit save. And now you can see we have this in past Boolean here. And now we're ready to apply the sort. So I'm going to jump into this return here, and I'm going to add a sort. First, I'm going to sort by that in past eval here in ascending order, because I want to be able to see the in past fields that are false versus true. So F comes before T in the alphabet, so we want to see those ones first, okay? Additionally, next I'm going to sort by the reservation.start date in ascending order. So first we're going to separate what reservations were in the past and in the future, so we're seeing the future ones first, and then we're applying a secondary sort so we see the start date with the lowest timestamp. So that is closest to the timestamp now. I know that's a lot. that doesn't make sense, please also check out the tutorial on that. Also play around with this, and it might start to make a little more sense. But obviously, much more of a technical term. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and that'll allow us to see whatever reservations that we've booked come next. And I'll go ahead and save this, and let's go ahead and go back. So now we've created all the API endpoints that we need for this first part of our video series for this rental marketplace application, which is all the guest side. So as you can see, we have the ability for the guest to authenticate, which is log in and sign up. Right here, auth me, view their own profile information. We have a get listing, which allows them to see all the listings in all the application. Then we have a search feature, so they can search from anything from place to property type, city, country, name, and description, and those properties will come up. I'm sorry, listing searches here. We have the get single listing detail view, which is this listing slash this variable listing ID. We have this my reservations, which we just created. So this will give us my reservations with a nice formatted human readable timestamp, and also sort it so that we're seeing whatever our next upcoming reservation in the future is first. Lastly, we have the ability to create a reservation where we calculate the duration of the stay in nights based on the start date and end date, and then also calculate the total price, which we pull from the listing in another table, and then we have the ability to see a single reservation. So I hope all that was helpful. A couple other things to point out. Xano also auto documents everything for you in Swagger. So if you prefer to use that Swagger documentation, that's right there. Let's just give it one more sanity check. Everything is requiring authentication. So now I'm ready to meet with Christina, and I'm going to see the front end design for the first time, and we're actually going to bind these API endpoints to the Bravo Studio front end, so we can have finally our working application, and we'll have something to showcase to you guys. So that's really excited. I'll see you in the next part into our front end.
Yeah, perfect. So what you see on the screen right now is recently just imported Figma file. This would look the same if you were using Adobe XD as well. And then what I've already also done is connect my phone, which has Bravo Vision loaded, to so that we can also preview how the app looks while we are doing all the data binding and testing it page by page to see how they work. So I think the first thing is that we go page by page and build the requests needed for each page, bind the data to each of the page. So data binding is connecting the data you get from the backend, the database, to the front end, the UI elements, the design. And then we will preview that page that we just created, that we just connected on Bravo Vision, and see how it works. And then we'll move on to the next page and so forth.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Okay. So after you've imported or you created a Bravo app with your design file, and you're ready to connect to data, to the backend, we will go to Data Library, go to New Collection, and we'll start with a blank request. The Airtable wizard is if you have Airtable as the backend, and it creates some sample requests for you. So for New Collection, we'll put in this home B&B, and we can put in Xano to know that it's connected to the backend. Okay, so after we create a new collection, we'll have this blank request set up. So let's get started with the first page. So in our user journey, let's do the login page. So after the intro, the user goes into login, and then you can see here, while the email input and the password input are working, if I click login right now, it's missing the data for it to actually work and authenticate to let the user get into the page. So let's start with the login request.
Awesome. Yeah, so if we jump to your Xano tab, we can easily grab that login endpoint URL by just selecting, that copy endpoint link, exactly. And then we can simply paste it in. And I believe this is a post method as well.
Yes. So we'll change that here.
Okay. And then because it's a post, I believe we'll probably need some test values and body. Is that correct?
Yes. Okay.
So
then we go into...
Yeah, so if you click on the endpoint, and if you open run and debug, you can get some example JSON. Yeah, and simply just copy that.
Okay, and then in Bravo, you will need to put in a variable in place of an actual specific value. So this one will be email, and you will put in this format, which you can find and learn more about how to input that in our tutorials and documentations. And this one is password. And then whenever we have any variables in our request setup in Bravo, you would need to put in test values in order to run the requests and get the data that you would need to bind to your app page. So here we'll put in the same thing, email, password, and then we'll just put in a test value. So for the login page, the test values need to be existing users, correct?
Correct, yes.
To run. So we
you can only log in an existing user, yep.
So we already have, it's a real password. We already have accounts for us too. So I'll put in that for the test value so that we can send and get the, to test if the request works. And then the second is to get the authorization token that we'll need for the following requests for the app.
Yeah, and so real quick, just a quick touch point on that. Whenever we sign up or log in a user, that's called authentication, and the output of those operations or actions is this authentication token, which we pass from endpoint to endpoint, so we know that the logged in user is who they say they are, or at least has the credentials of the logged in user. Yeah, and I can touch more on that as we go into an authenticated request. But
okay, and then we can see that here we've selected the authentication token, and I will go ahead now and just change the name to the string, so that this will be used later to also as a variable to in the following request to help pass the token from this generated in this login request to the remaining requests. And then that is it for the login page. So let's go back to our projects and bind this. So in order to bind, we just simply go back to our project, click on the page that you want to bind, select the requests, select the collection, select the requests, and select the UI elements, the visual elements, and match it to their respective data, their data path that will be connected in the backend. So I believe in the login request, actually, what is necessary is just, let me double check something. Because there should be a submit button here, which should show up login button. Aha.
okay.
I think. Okay, let me just double check. We can always edit out this part.
Oh yeah, totally.
Because default, it should. That's it. Okay, let me just double check. what I did in the other request,
Okay.
the other project. Login. Actually, I don't need to bind anything. No, I do. I need to bind the email and the password. Yeah, I thought so. But then the email and the password, they give me an option to bind. Yes. Okay.
Sweet.
Okay, perfect. So we are on here, and so we have selected the collection, the request, and then we will select the visual element to bind to the data path. So I would say the 3 Bravo tags that needs configuration data binding would be the email input, the password input, and the login button, which submits the value that's inputted by the end user into the backend and then allows them to authenticate. So the first is the email input. And here under content destination, so where the content will go, we will select the email data path, the password with the password data path. Just give that a second. Yep. And then for the login button, there's no action to do in the binding, but we will need to configure the response action. So if the login was successful, we'll go to the listings, the property list. So the homepage of the app. And then if it's an error, we'll just say, try again. We'll show an alert. And my keyboard doesn't work. Let's see if it's working.
I know.
That's interesting. Oh, let me see if I can copy and paste. I don't know if it is a Zoom issue or if it's a Bravo issue right now. But well, what we can do is do refresh. I'll just say on error, we'll refresh. Okay. And then that is it for the login page. So let's go back to the data library and continue with our request setup. The second one would be the sign up, which is pretty similar in terms of functionality with the login and also with this request setup itself, right?
Correct. Yeah, sign up is going to be very similar. One of the only differences is we need to sign up a new user. So one of the things the sign up endpoint does is check that whoever's signing up doesn't already exist as a user.
Okay, so in this case, we'll duplicate the login page, change it to sign up page. Oh.
No.
My keyboard is actually not working. It's working here.
That's so weird.
Yeah. Let me refresh Bravo.
Okay.
Okay.
That's so weird.
Okay, so maybe I don't know. Maybe it was just a refreshment. So maybe for the next error action that we can actually
yeah,
we can actually type in the alert. Okay, so starting from here. Okay, so now we will change just change the request to sign up page so that we know it's for the sign up. Paste the endpoint that we copy from Xano, and then the body remains the same, and we can double check here.
Yeah, so name isn't actually required, but we can definitely add that in, yes.
what we can do is, I'll just do this. And change these. And then, so for the test values, it would be the same, but we need to input values of an account that doesn't exist.
Correct.
So we put test3@gmail.com, password test123, and the name we can put in test user.
And why don't you do test1234 for the password, because I think there is a minimum value set.
Okay.
And that is,
and then,
oh, just a note on that, that's configurable in Xano, and there's documentation on that, just FYI.
Oh, perfect. Okay, and then so we just sent this request, and also again, it is successful. So then we do the same thing as we did with the login page, go back to our project and bind the data with the sign up page. Sign up page, same thing, email and password. So we did add, so although we did add the name field in the actual design, we didn't include the name field, but then again, we can easily add a name input into the design itself and then connect that to the name data path for it to work.
Perfect.
Okay, and then the last part is on success. We go to the listings page, and on error, let's say, try again. Alrighty, okay, 2 requests done. Next one would be the listings page. But before that, let's actually try out the login page. So in Bravo Vision, I will just do a quick refresh. And press login. I'll put in my account. And then there we go. We authenticated. And now we got to the home page. So tested, login, sign up works. Sign up will be the same thing, but I won't run through that right now. And then so now we see we're in the listing page, and we're connecting the list of all the listings to this page, and we'll populate this placeholder into the actual listings that we have. So we will create a new request for the listings page, go back to Xano, copy this endpoint, and this is a GET request, correct? Yes.
That is correct, yep.
Yeah, let's put in properties listings. And then in Xano, we see that it requires authentication.
Correct. Yeah. So now that it requires authentication, basically the user needs to be logged into your application to actually run these API endpoints. So the way we're going to set up authentication is going to be with a header here. And the way that Xano handles authentication is via JWE token. So the format for that is exactly as Christina is writing, is authorization as the header and then bearer, followed by the actual token. And because we want to make that dynamic per user, in Bravo, we'll do that $, and then the curly brackets to make it a dynamic variable for the token.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then within, we'll put in the same name that we have for the data path of the actual auth token that we got from the login page. So that way these two requests are connected. And then you'll see that if I send right away, the request setup is prompting me to put in an authorization token as the test value in order to send this request. So we will need an actual token from the request.
Yeah, so we can really easily grab that in Xano. If you open the run and debug right there on the top right, and right in the header, if you hit that blue style, you can select one of our existing users to grab a valid authentication token from. And what you can do is hit that copy button, exactly. And now that the auth token is on your clipboard, so you can simply paste that in.
And here we go. Here's all the data. Okay, so now when you have the list of received data, you can go ahead and select everything you would need for this page right here. So what we need is the image, the title of the property, and the price per night. And then of course, because it's a list, we want to select all the data. So this selects the array or the list of the data itself, instead of any specific listing. So we were looking for the name, the price, and the image, which will be the image URL. And I believe that is it. And here we can double check what we selected, and we will go back to the projects and connect. So let's find the listings page. Okay, and same thing. Select collections, select requests, and select the visual elements. I'm going to just do a quick search rather than going through all the layers. So we have, let's see, image. Let's see, it should show up here. Oh, the first thing that we need to do when it's a list page is to connect the array that we selected. So that was the data all with the container that contains the, if I pull up, in Figma, what we did was we created a container around this one list item that contained exactly this one list item. And then, so we need to connect the list of data, which is the place list, to the container itself, so it knows to populate itself. And then we can go in and select. So first we have image, then we have the name or the title, and the price. So let me just give that a second to save. And then in our Bravo Vision, let's test it out. I'm going to quickly sign in again. And this time, it should show perfect. It should show, it's showing our listings right there.
Awesome.
Okay.
It's looking good.
So, yep. Okay, next page. Another page done. So next page will be the detail page. So if I'm a user and I click on a listing that I want to see, here is where all the information about that listing will show up. So same thing, go back to the data library, and what I'll do also here is to duplicate the listings, properties listings requests, so that it duplicates the authorization token with it, so that we don't have to manually input it again. And then change the name to property detail. Go back to Xano, grab this endpoint. And then for Bravo, we just need to add the $ for it to work as a Bravo variable. And then if we press send, automatically Bravo prompts you to give a test value for the variable that you have in the setup. So here we need a listings ID. And where we can find the listings ID is from the listings requests. So let's just take this one that showed up. Or if we, I guess when we're setting up the database of listings, you also do see all the IDs of the listings, so you can just
yeah. So just in the database table in Xano, you can see all the different IDs, or just by running the endpoint in Xano, it'll give you a list of all of them, so you know which one you can grab to test.
Okay, so since we know it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll just take number 1, run it, and then here we have all the data points for the detail page. And
Correct.
what you see in these color texts are just example values, but of course, because they're dynamic, the actual data that will show will depend on which one that you actually tap on. Okay, so for this one, we need the image. And here it's going to be a horizontal carousel slider. So we'll need the array of the multiple images that we have in the database, the title, the weather, and the description.
So remember, on this endpoint too, we're also hitting an external API where we're pulling in the weather based on the location of the city, and you can see all that data here being sent to Bravo as well.
Yeah, so here what we have in design is the temperature in Celsius and the text of the weather condition. And these will replace exactly the text here. We have the image, which will grab the array and the URL. We have the name, description, city, and the price.
Do we need place or property type at all? Or no?
No, here
maybe place type, maybe entire loft.
In the design, I think we do not have it included, but we can also we can easily add it into the design as just the same way that we have listed the city and the weather.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I believe later on in the search we'll still be able, even though these are not included visually, we'll still be able to search through the listings with these properties.
Yep.
Okay, so same thing, go back to projects after we've selected our data, find the detail page, and this is this one. Select our collection, our requests, and then select, this is the image slider, so we'll later see how it looks. And then we have the title, which is name, city with city. I clicked that too fast. The degree, condition text, and description. Title, city, degree. And then our price is here. Okay. I believe that is it. And then we go back and let's select this urban city loft. I might need to refresh again. Yeah. And to go just slightly faster, going onward, we can connect a few pages at a time, and then afterwards we can go back to the Bravo Vision to test.
Okay. Yeah, I think that works.
Okay, so let's try. If I click on Urban City Loft, it should give me the detail page. Oh no. What are we missing here? We have the properties detail, we have the listings. Let's go back to data library. There's sending, all good. Let's see. Oh, okay.
We have the
Yes. So what we need is to match this listings ID to a data path in the actual listings request. So what we forgot to do here was to select the data ID here and then change this name to match
listings.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that, there we go. So that these two are matching and connected. So let me see if I need to refresh again. Most likely. No. Okay. Let's refresh. Mail.com. Okay, perfect. And what are we missing here? We are missing the images.
Yeah,
but we do have urban city loft. We have the city showing, we have the weather showing, and we have the description and the price showing. So let's go back to the project and troubleshoot. So I believe here, I think I connected the wrong data. I think that should do it. So there we go.
Nice.
So now the images are pulling in into this horizontal carousel. Perfect. Next up, we have the reservation form.
Okay. So this one is going to be a post command when the user actually creates a reservation.
So in Xano, let's see, it is under this one.
Correct.
So this one is make reservation. And post requests. And since it's post, most of the time post request requires a body.
Correct. So you
and
can,
this.
Yep, you can grab that easily in Xano, right in the debugger.
And then the same thing that we were doing with the login sign page, just replace the actual value with a Bravo variable. So let's put that as, do the same name. I believe that's, okay. And then also in test values to put the same thing, so that we can run the request and select the data. Okay. So listings ID, we were doing 1. Start date. Is there a format necessary for the start dates?
Xano's input for timestamp is pretty flexible, so we can use just month/day /year, and that should suffice. Yeah.
I haven't put it the European way, so the day/month/year. Would that work?
That will still work, but I think it'll pick it up as the US way. So
okay.
yeah. So you'd be having a 6-month stay there, maybe.
Okay, let's change that to okay.
And then I think we'll also need the authorization header too on this endpoint.
Yes.
Because it does require authentication.
So we'll just quickly copy that from another request. Give that a send. Let's see, what are we missing? Error building request body.
Listings ID, start date, end date. Yeah.
I think that's what we're missing here. There we go. Okay, so here, request successful, and we have our received data. And what do we need for our data? So we have the start date, end date, number of guests, and then also in the next page, we from our design, we have the overview of the listing that we picked and the total price, total night, and price per night. So let's go and select that. So price, total, and night. And then we need the listings name, and I believe that was it.
Do we need the images array or just the image URL? Will that suffice?
Yeah, just the URL.
Okay.
I believe that will work. And in the case that it doesn't, often you just select the first image of the array.
Oh, okay.
But let's give that a try first. Often with Bravo, with the data binding and data setup and data binding, it's just like try and error back and forth. And until it works. Okay, so let's find the page, go to collection, requests, and we are finding the start date with start date, end date with end date. So this is under content destination where we're sending the requests, sending the content, number of guests with, I guess for here, the number of guests is something that I put in the design, but we haven't added to the endpoint, but it could be something that we do add, just like in the reverse direction. If we have something in from the endpoint that I didn't put in the design, that's something that we can quickly add, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's a feature we decide to add down the road because maybe there's just certain properties that have a maximum number of guests or something. So yeah, absolutely. It can be something easily added.
Okay, so for this page, we have bound everything. So for the response action, on success, we will go to the next page, which I believe is called pricing detail. And on error, let's do an alert, and let's just do a typical try again, but you can customize it to say whatever you want. You can also open a URL to a troubleshooting page for your app. Okay, and then the next page after this is when the user checks over their reservation. And we will use the same request because it retrieved the data that is necessary for this one. Okay, so what is needed? We have total nights, which I believe is nights. We have price per night, and total price, which is total.
And then are there any details on the property on this page?
Yes, let's find it. Image and city. That's what we needed, which I did not select from the data library. So I'll just quickly select that. Okay, go back. And city. Okay, let's double check if we have everything. This per night. I might need to do a refresh again. Okay, total nights, got that. Price per night, price, and total price, got that. Image, got that. City, got it. And we're missing the name. Okay, that is it.
Awesome.
So as you can see here, it's I think after maybe even like the second request, it's quite it's a normal, you get into this flow, this normal process of you know where to copy the endpoint, what to set up, what to bind, and it's just a matter of going page by page and then testing on Bravo Vision, making sure it works before you move on to the next page. So let's test this reservation. And something that I did not add in the design, in this particular design, but what would be useful for future testing is the Bravo tag to refresh the page just by pull down to refresh. And I think that way we can avoid the updating, refreshing the entire app itself and having to log in every time, because what it does when I update with Bravo and refresh the app itself, it's as if you've closed the app in real life and loaded it again. So that's why we're seeing the login page every time. Okay, so let's go to, let's say, this beach getaway. We see the detail page. We want to reserve. Goes to the reservation. Now let's say we want to go from August 1st to August 4th. Put in number of guests. Continue. And then, nope. Let's see, is it calculating, if it's calculating it right?
Said number of nights like 18,000, didn't it?
Yeah. 18,000. Okay. So that's something that we can check in the request to see if that is being calculated correctly. So in this case, yeah, the start date and the end date, it's 9 nights. And then here we're seeing 9 nights times 300, and that gives us the total. So the calculation is correct. It's registering the start and date and end date here correctly. Let's go to the project itself and see if I've connected this correctly. So the start date, I guess it didn't save.
Okay.
That might explain why.
Makes me feel a little better.
End date, end date. Okay. Alrighty. Let's go to another one. Let's go to Urban City Loft. Reserve. Pick a date. Let's try the same date. August 4th. Continue. There we go. And what we're missing here is the image. So let's go back to this page with the overview, and it might just be because my internet connection is currently laggy, so it's not pulling up. Or it's what we talked about before, where I didn't select the array of images, but I also did not select a specific one specific image. So here, what we're saying is we're selecting, by selecting 0, which is the first image of each listing, then we select the URL for the first image of each listing to appear in the, right here.
Got it.
Okay, so we got that. Let's go back to image, and then we can test this. Also add more at the end. But for now, let's go back to, or go on to the next screen. I believe, let's see, how many screens do we have left? We have the trips, which shows the reservation, the detail page, which is basically the same thing as the listings and the detail page. So that's something that we can run through pretty quickly. And then we have the search bar that does a global search of all the listing properties. And then we have the profile page to show the user that's logged in.
Yep.
Okay. So I would say, since we are getting into the flow of this, we can go back to data library and create these requests pretty quickly. So next one, so yeah, it's just a matter of copy and paste, and testing and binding. Next one is to get reservation. So it would be this one, correct?
So that's going to show the list of all of your reservations. If you want a, so that would be like your trips, all your trips, yes.
Yes, so it would be this page.
Yes.
So I think actually, since it's so similar to the listings page, we can copy this one. Change that to my, we have it as well, say my reservations. And I believe that is all that's needed. Except for this design, the difference is instead of price per night, it's your start and end date. And let's just check. We have the image already selected. We have the name, start and end date. Perfect. Same thing, go back to the project, find the screen, which is my trips. It is place list image. Guess we didn't select the image, but we'll go ahead and do the other ones. I guess it didn't
because
select.
because it's a list, maybe we forgot to select the
Yes.
yes, there it is.
Perfect. Name, start date. Yeah. So now all that is showing up. Perfect. And that is everything that's needed for this page. And then the detail page, we go back to the data library. And the detail page, it is, I guess it'd be pretty similar to my reservations. Let me see how, is there a detail? Yes. So we would actually just add, connect the detail page to the same detail page request that we did here. Because the My Reservations request, it pulls up the list of properties that the user has reserved. But then the detail page doesn't really matter which, it's not user specific. It's still just the general information about that listing.
Right. So then if they click from the reservations page, do we just need to make sure that that listing ID is selected? Okay.
Right. Yeah. And I think I will double check. I think when we duplicated the listings requests, it duplicated the ID with the name already changed.
Got it.
Okay, so let's find the detail page here. It's property detail. Same thing. Find the image. So this is, we're doing the exact same as the detail page. Nothing has changed here. City, we have the degree, the condition, and description. And then as you can see here in the design, the only difference is this contact host button. And our idea, I remember during the intro, was that the user, after they reserve, they would be able to see or they would be able to contact the host. And so when they click contact host, it will, for now, it will pop up your native email app for you to write an email to the host. And this is something that can also be dynamically connected to the backend. If we had in our data, the list of host emails based on each listings.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we go ahead and add the second side to the marketplace with the host, we'll be able to connect the two.
Yeah, so as you can see here, and then, but in Bravo Vision, you can already see how it will work. So let's say this is my reservation, and I click contact host and pops up my email for me to draft a message. Or you can do call phone number or open URL to a social media page, whatever you can decide which action to put based on the Bravo tag that you choose. Okay, so that is done. I will do the refresh at the end so that we can review the functionality at the end. The next part is this search bar. So for that, go back to Xano again and find the listing search endpoint. So this one is a get request. Put in search, and let's see, what would be the necessary headers or test values?
Yeah, so we'll once again need the authorization and then the bearer, exactly. And then we also are taking in a search input.
Yes. So actually here we will need to add in a variable based on what the user has input in the search bar.
Okay.
So it would be search equals and then the typical Bravo variable setup, search. And then so here we will need that under test value, and what could be a value of the search? It could be anything in the
so we're searching on everything from name, description, place, property type, city, country. So yeah, if you search loft, that would come up with a 500 error.
Okay, let's debug this. Oh, I'm missing the end bracket. There we go.
Okay.
Okay, so what this is returning is the search results, which will be the next page after the search bar page. So, and the search results is a list page. So we will select basically the same thing that we would select it for the properties list or my reservations list. First, the data, the entire array. Then we have the name. I believe we have the price and the one image. And then again, once the request is done, we go back to the project and bind. So first we would bind the search input with the search variable. And then on success, go to the results, search results page. And on error, let's show an alert. And then with the same requests, let's find the search results page. We will bind, now I remember this time to bind the array with the container and the other data points that we selected. So image, title, and price, as we have on the design. Okay, perfect. So I would say that covers most of the app. Let's give it a test. And then the last part would just be to display the profile information of whichever user that's logged in. So I'm going to give this app a refresh. It's interesting that QuickTime, you might see it as blank right now, but QuickTime automatically hides when you're typing in password.
I've seen that, yeah. I was wondering if that was an Apple thing or a QuickTime thing.
Yeah. Okay, so we have the listings. And if I go to my trips right now, it actually does show the trip that we just tried to book. And then, of course, the important thing about testing on Bravo Vision is to see if you actually bound things correctly, which, as we see on this page, the image is missing and also the title. So go into that and see just to make sure if that is bound correctly. So we have the start and end date correct. Let's check the so we actually did not select the listing image. I believe what I was seeing was because when we duplicate a request, it duplicates endpoints from the previous requests, which might not match the ones from here. So we have the image and the name.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Okay. Go to place lists and rebind these image, name. Okay. So if I go to this again, what I'm going to do is, since it doesn't refresh right away, let's start with testing the reservation form. Let's go to this modern shared apartment and try to reserve it. Let's do September 20 to September 26. That's the same. Perfect. Total nights, price per night. The total seems
so price
incorrect.
per night isn't getting fed. Seems.
Oh yes, that's true. Because the total is correct, but the price per night should show 75 euros. Okay, so here is where we can also go into our app screen again. Price per night, exactly. Okay, so this didn't save, and then that should solve it. But then in the meantime, let's reserve this. And now we're pulling up the trips, but these are all the trips that I have reserved from today and also in the past. So that's why we're seeing a big list of it. But let's see. Well, for example, here we have our recently reserved modern shared apartment with the dates, the start and end date. And now, but when we try to pull up the detail page, it is missing something. I remember seeing that request error message before.
So on the list of my trips, don't we need to pass the listing ID?
Yes. Yes, that was what we forgot to double check. Data ID is selected, and here it is changed, but let's just reselect that and see if that solves it. Was here. Okay. So, whoops. I'm just gonna go to another page to see if I can refresh without logging out again. Well, it's showing the detail page now.
Yeah,
but it's
our images are gone.
And these are not working. Okay, let's refresh.
Okay.
Okay, trips. Here we have listings. Ah, darn. Hmm. Let's see. My reservations. Okay, I think I will need two. This is a part that marketing cuts, and I will just check my. I'll just check my other request setup and see how it's done. It was my reservations.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things selected. Data listings ID. Oh, maybe okay, data listings ID. And then in this one, my reservations send. Is there an it's this one.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
So I think this ID at the top is actually the ID of the reservation, and then the other one is the list. Yes.
Yeah. So now we have this selected, and that should be the correct listing ID. And then just changing the name so it matches the detail variable. And that should work.
Perfect.
And let's give it one more try. Again, I don't know if I need to refresh. Oh, no. Let's refresh. Refresh sometimes always works. It's like turning off your phone and restarting again, or checking in to see if the power plug is actually plugged in. Password. Okay, my trips. So let's refresh. Oh, there we go.
Nice.
Done. Okay, that is solved. And then last thing to test is the search bar. So let's search for the keyword beach. And in theory, it should pull up as so. A search result a listing containing the keyword beach. And then, I believe this one, we haven't connected this one to a detail page, but it would be the exact same thing where we have the same ID, listings ID, and we connect this to the same detail page that was in our design for the listings. And then also, for example, we can test another search with something that's not actually visually in our app, like we said before. So beach was in the title, but for example, what was something that we didn't include in the app, but is in the database?
Yeah, I think there are some fields like type of place or property type that we could search on. So for example, I think property type one might be, entire place.
If I do entire, just the beach getaway would be an entire place.
Yep, that should be an entire place. Looks like there might have been a couple more populating there. I think apartment.
Okay.
Or you could do country.
Apartment. Yep.
Okay.
Looks good. And then country, for example, we did not add that into our design, but now it's showing this loft that is located, the detail page is not connected. But this loft that is, so we can see here, it's located in Barcelona. So it's showing that as a result. So perfect, search works perfectly. And then the last part is profile. And I believe that is the last request of the day.
Yeah, so profile will be under auth there, and you can just do the authenticated me, which just finds out what user it is based on their unique authentication token.
Okay, so the last page or the last request is the profile information requests. And then that is the off me, which we get from Xano here. And we put that as profile page. And then does it require authentication, authorization?
Yes.
Yes, it does. Okay, so we just copy that. Okay, and that is it. So here we pulled up the information for the user that's logged in. So we have the name, the email, and a profile picture URL. And then let's go into back to our project as usual. Get the see, I believe this is the one that we're working on, no? Okay.
Yes.
The collection, the request, and let's see, email, name, and profile image. Okay. And then something that we also need to do is in the design we have when the user clicks on the profile image icon, it is a remote action. That gets the profile, the user ID, and then passes the user onto the profile page. So on success, go to profile and then okay, so let's test this out.
Okay.
In theory, we have our entire app.
Awesome. Let's run it from the top. Check it all out.
Yeah. Okay. Intro page, user logs in or signs up if they're a new user. Logs in, sees the listings.
Nice.
Search. I search for, let's try Loft. You have these two lofts, perfect. And then, let's say I want to book this loft. Look through the images, perfect. Sees real-time weather data. Reserve for, let's say we reserve for October, 2 nights. Continue. Total nights, total. We have our overview of our reservation. This takes us to the My Trips page, which we have all the, well, as you can see, these are all the test reservations that we've done.
And just a quick note, if you kind of scroll up to the top,
yeah,
the way we've just sorted it, and I talk about it in my part, but we kind of see what's coming up next first, which is kind of a unique way to sort the data.
Yeah, so you can see here we have the August ones and then mid-August ones, and then the ones after.
Correct.
And then here is a Bravo tag that search and filters whatever is on the page by the text. So no data binding needed. You just put in the Bravo tag in your design file. And if I want to search city. No. If I want to search city, it shows up all the cities. If I want to search beach, it gives me the beach. So this is good for, and let's say I have a lot of reservations and I just want to do a quick search through that. And then the last part is the profile page. And here we have our profile image, name, and email. And then here, how it works, gives us feedback. These are things that you can connect to your app, terms and conditions, web pages, or another detail page with the text. And then finally, the logout, which goes back to the login screen.
Awesome.
And there we have it.
That's super cool. It's, it just still just scratching the surface of, how powerful these two tools can be used to work together, and really cut out the time of development and engineering, and cost savings too. I mean, we just built basically a rental marketplace application in such a short amount of time. And, hopefully you guys can repeat this as well. Christine, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think you covered it. You pretty much covered it all. I wanted to highlight, we both ran through basically everything that you would need to do to set up the front end, the back end, and the data and the binding. So in a matter of, I would say, if you were to work on this in real life, it would take a day or two, which is amazing for what we have built. And this is completely, the result is a completely native app that is publishable in the App Store.
Absolutely. And everyone, thank you so much for watching these videos. I hope you found them super helpful. We're glad you're interested in using both Bravo Studio and Xano together, and leveraging the power that both these tools have together.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye. Okay.
All right.
We're done.
Good job.
You too.